Our next topic is about World War II. Has anybody heard about World War II?
No, sir. No, sir.
You sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?
During the 1920s, the Imperial Japanese Army expanded greatly in its number of men and military spending. The Meiji Constitution put the emperor in charge of all the Imperial Japanese Armed Forces, although most of the time, the Ministry of War and the General Staff Office controlled its actions. The Kwantung Army, an army group of the Imperial Japanese Army, started a new phase of Japanese imperialism by invading Manchuria in 1931. The Imperial Japanese Army at this point had 17 divisions. Starting in 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War, which some historians consider the beginning of World War II, saw Japan against China. During this conflict, the Imperial Japanese Army gained its reputation for brutality. The war in China would drain the army's resources and bring forward a need for increased conscription. The Imperial Japanese Army also conflicted with the Red Army during the 30s. Starting with a border clash, it turned into a large war near the city of Nomonhan, ending in 1939 with the decisive Nomonhan Incident, or the Battles of Khalkhin Gol. At the end of this conflict, the Red Army defeated the Japanese Army. This loss of prestige for the Imperial Japanese Army put the Imperial Japanese Navy as the priority, and this inter-service rivalry would continue throughout World War II. In 1941, the United States joined the war when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor under the orders of General Hideki Tojo. Emperor Hirohito had appointed Tojo, who was also the Minister of War from 1940, as Prime Minister. By this time in the war, the Imperial Japanese Army possessed 51 divisions, totaling 1.7 million men. Most of these divisions were mobilized in China, and large garrisons were held in Manchuria, Korea, Formosa, Indochina, and the Home Islands. The Imperial Japanese Army was victorious early on in the Pacific Theater. The capture of Hong Kong in 1941 and Singapore in 1942 humiliated Britain, which had underestimated the Japanese forces greatly. In 1942, the Japanese Army also captured the Philippines from the United States, taking on thousands of American and Filipino prisoners of war. As well as this, the Imperial Japanese Army, assisted by Thai forces and the Burmese Independence Army, occupied Burma and pushed the British and Chinese forces out. Eventually, Allied counteroffensives such as the Guadalcanal Campaign forced the Japanese Army into a more defensive posture. From 1943, there was a shortage of military, medicine, and food supplies, and starvation would contribute to too many Japanese soldiers' deaths. As the war progressed and the situation became more desperate for the army, Japanese soldiers started to use more sacrificial tactics. In the Battle of Saipan in 1944, only a handful of troops surrendered to U.S. forces. In 1945, the war looked hopeless for the Japanese. U.S. forces had taken back the Philippines and captured Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The army, at almost 2 million troops strong, was recalled to defend the mainland against impending invasion. However, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki prevented further conflict. With the Japanese surrender and the end of the war, the Imperial Japanese Army was dissolved. Approximately 6.3 million men served in the Imperial Japanese Army from 1937 to 1945. It is estimated that 1.3 million were killed or missing in action.
Hello students, our next topic is going to be Malaysian Union. So sir, I'm going to show you about the Malaysian Union in the mother paper.
The Malays in their own land. The Malayan Union, proposed in 1946, clearly placed Malaya under the British Crown. Political and administrative power was to be held by the British, while the Malay rulers would only have a say over the Islamic religion and Malay customs. The rights and special privileges of the Malays were abolished, and they were placed in their own land on equal footing with the immigrant population, politically, economically, and socially. MacMichael Treppan then forced the Malay rulers to accede to the Union and subsequently gazetted it, causing consternation among the Malays. It proved the catalyst for the awakening of Malay nationalism. Malay newspapers such as the Utusan Melayu, Majlis and Warta Negara started a campaign of attack against the British and fanned the spirit of nationalism among the Malays. They urged the Malays to unite and held a congress to oppose the Malayan Union. Dato' On Jaafar, at the time Batu Pahat district officer, responded to the call by setting up the Peninsular Malay Johor movement, Pergerakan Melayu Semenanjung Johor, on 1st January 1946. Following its formation, the first Malay Congress was held from 1st to 3rd March 1946 at the Sultan Sulaiman Club in Kuala Lumpur. This first Congress, held to unite the Malays, was attended by 41 organizations from throughout the Malay Peninsula. On the first day, thousands of Malays gathered to show support for the Congress and demonstrate opposition to the Malayan Union. At the same time, British officers who had served in Malaya, like Frank Swettenham, George Maxwell, Richard Winstead and Cecil Clementi Smith, voiced their opposition to the Malayan Union through letters to the Times. The British authorities were, however, firm in pushing ahead with the proposal for the Malayan Union. Sir Edward Gent was appointed governor and the Malayan Union declared on 1st April 1946. The Malay rulers boycotted the installation of the governor. Malays demonstrated their opposition by donning black songkoks with white bands for 7 days as a symbol of mourning. On 11th May 1946, at the 3rd Malay Congress in Johor Bahru, the United Malay National Organisation UMNO, the first political organisation set up to oppose the Malayan Union, was formed. Dato' On bin Jaafar was elected its first president. Malay opposition became more strident after the formation of UMNO. The British authorities, alarmed at the growth of Malay resistance, sent Captain L.D. Gummans and Lieutenant Colonel Rhys Williams to Malaya. Their arrival in Johor Bahru was greeted by thousands of Malays who lined the streets leading to the palace. The same was repeated in Kuala Lumpur, Penang, Negeri Sembilan and other towns in Peninsular Malaya. In addition, 10,000 Malays demonstrated in Kota Baru. The British were finally forced to admit failure and recognize Malay opposition to the Malayan Union. The governor of the Malayan Union, Sir Edward Gent, held a special meeting with the rulers and UMNO leaders headed by Dato' On Jaafar. A new constitution was drawn up for the formation of a federation which would safeguard the special rights and privileges of the Malays in Malaya. The plan took off on February the 1st, 1948 with the formation of the Federation of Malaya, which replaced the Malayan Union of 1946.
Hi. Aishu. Yes. What are you doing?
Studying for Constitution of the Nation.
Oh yeah. Sir will ask question about constitution.
Independence.
Independence topic, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I have to study lah.
Come, let's study.
Do you have any idea about it?
No, I don't know.
Okay, what chapter?
Independence. Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Okay, study.
At the stroke of midnight on 31st August 1957, the cry of Merdeka arose from the multitude gathered at the Selangor Club field, signaling the birth of a new nation, the Federation of Malaya. The 1948 Constitution of Malaya spearheaded efforts towards independence and self-rule. The British, however, stipulated very clear conditions for independence. For independence to be granted, there must be unity and political cooperation among the people of the various races residing in Malaya. The leader of the United Malays National Organization UMNO, Dr. Onn Jaafar, made attempts to convince the Malays of the benefit of sharing political power with the non-Malays. He proposed that the doors to UMNO membership be opened to non-Malays. However, his proposal was rejected, causing Dr. Onn to resign from UMNO and form the Independence of Malaya Party (IMP) in August 1951. Tunku Abdul Rahman Putra was appointed to head UMNO. In contrast to Dr. Onn's strategy, the Tunku established political cooperation with the Malayan Chinese Association (MCA). In the Kuala Lumpur Town Council elections of 1952, the UMNO-MCA alliance won 9 out of the 12 seats contested. The political cooperation between UMNO and MCA constituted the foundation stone for the formation of the Alliance Party. The political collaboration between the races became even stronger when the Malayan Indian Congress (MIC) joined the alliance in
What is your name?
My name is Shaila.
Okay. I'll ask you a few questions.
Okay.
What is the date of our first Independence Day?
The date will be on 31st August 1957.
Okay. The second question is, who is the father of Independence Day?
Okay, the father of the Independence Day will be Tunku Abdul Rahman.
Okay. The third one is, where does the Independence Day being held?
It was held in Medical Square.
Thank you.
Alright.
Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
My name is Durga Darshini.
Okay, I'll ask you a few questions. Where did Tunku Abdul Rahman first announce the date of Malaya's independence?
Which is on 20th February 1956 at Padang Gilin Melaka.
And the second question is, how many times did Tunku Abdul Rahman shout the Merdeka on 30th August 1957?
7 times?
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, Janani. Hi, Nisha. Hello, Tati.
Hi, sir.
So, how are you all?
Yeah, I'm good, sir.
Okay. Now we're going to study about the Malaysian 1963.
Sir, which one, sir?
Page 13. Okay? So, let me explain to you about the Malaysian 1963. Okay? The British government intended to give up Singapore. And finally, Nisha, what are you doing?
Sorry, sir.
Don't make me mad, then I get angry. You understand? Finally, Nisha, since you interrupt my lecture, I want Nisha to talk about Malaysian 1963.
On 16 September 1963, the establishment of the Malaysian Federation took place. It marked the merging of Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak and Singapore, which left the Federation only 2 years later to form Malaysia. The 16th September is a public holiday in Malaysia, known as Malaysian Day. In Brunei, the opposition to the Federation of Malaysia was especially strong. In December 1962, a revolt against the monarchy and its support for the merger was attempted but failed. However, the incident influenced the Sultan's 1963 decisions not to join Malaysia. The other potential candidates meanwhile went to form the proposed state. In 1962, a referendum was held in Singapore, although it did not include the possibility to vote against the merger. Singaporeans was only given the choice between three alternatives on how to integrate. It was seen as a true expression of the public's support in favor of Malaysia. The formation of Malaysia was finally made possible with the signing of the international treaty, the Malaysia Agreement, 1963, between the United Kingdom, the Federation of Malaya, Sarawak, North Borneo and Singapore. Prior to the formation of Malaysia, Sarawak gained its self-government administration on 22 July 1963, while North Borneo began self-government administration from the United Kingdom on 31st August 1963, those coinciding with the 6th anniversary of the Malayan independence. 31st August 1963 was also the day on which the formation of Malaysia was planned to occur. Several issues related to objection of neighboring Indonesia and the Philippines to the formation of Malaysia, which could not be resolved and afterwards lead to politics and confrontation, especially between Malaysia and Indonesia, delayed the declaration to 16 September 1963. On the same day, North Borneo was renamed Sabah. The declaration of Malaysia ceremony was held at Stadium Merdeka in Kuala Lumpur, the same place where 7 years earlier Malaya's independence ceremony had taken place. In front of about 30,000 people, Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman recited the formation of Malaysia declaration, followed by his chanting Merdeka Independence 7 times. A new nation was born.
Okay, students, our next topic is going to be Malay states. So, since the class is getting too bored, so I'm going to sing you about the Malay states. You understand?
Federated Malay States, 1895 to 1946, a federation of 4 protected states in the Malay Peninsula, Selangor, Perak, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, established by the British government 1895. The United Kingdom was responsible for foreign affairs and defence of the Federation, whilst the states continued to be responsible for their domestic policies. Even so, the British Resident General would give advice on domestic issues and the states were bound by treaty to follow the advice. The Federation had Kuala Lumpur, which was then the part of Selangor, as its capital. The first Resident General was Frank Swettenham. The Federation, along with the other Malay states and British possessions of the peninsula, was overrun and occupied by the Japanese during World War II. After the liberation of Malaysia, following the Japanese surrender, the Federation was not restored, but the federal form of government was retained as the principal model for consolidating. Together with the Strait Settlement and Unfederated Malay States, formed the Malay Union. 2 years later, Malayan Union became the Federation of Malaya. Finally, Malaysia in 1963 with the inclusion of Sabah, North Borneo, Sarawak and Singapore. The coat of arms of the Federated Malay States featured a shield guarded by 2 tigers. On top of the shield is the crown known as Eastern Crown in English heraldry, symbolizing the Federation of Monarchies under the protection of the United Kingdom. The combination of the four colors of the shield represent the color of the flags of the states of the FMS in the same way of the strips.
Guys, we are coming to the end of our lecture. We are almost done with chapter 1. You understand? Understand, right?
Understand, sir.
Okay. So see you all with the next chapter 2.